Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tori and I read a lot of books, so I like to talk about books a lot. If that sounds good to you, then stay here and listen to me talk about books. So today I wanted to make a case for rereading books that you have. And I want to talk about this for two reasons. One, I feel like in the book community, people are very focused on getting the next best thing, reading their next 5-star read, buying the new release book. There's just all this pressure about reading as many books as you can, as fast as you can to keep up with the publishing cycle that we're stuck in. And I feel like this leads to greater problems that I'll get into in a minute. But because of that, people rarely stop and reread the books that they own or that they've read before, that they love from their childhood, etc. And then the second reason that I wanted to talk about this is that I'm a teacher. So I work with people learning to read. I work with people that are really learning to step into their own as readers, how to pick books for themselves, how to sustain that interest and that love of reading. And I tell kids all the time, like, I get that there's a lot of barriers sometimes between people and reading, but I truly believe that there's something out there for everybody, and you really just have to find what that is for you. And I think rereading is a huge part of that as well. Whether you're a kid or an adult, whether you used to love reading and fell out of it, or you've never loved reading, I really truly believe there's something out there for everybody. All right, so here are my reasons for why I think people should reread more books, my thesis, if you will. So my number one reason is that I think it helps fight this consumerist cycle that we're stuck in. People are constantly telling you to buy stuff, and one of those things is books, and we always feel like we have to buy new books, like, and I am partial to this too. I mean, there's something to be said about like the calm feeling of getting a sweet treat or a coffee and going to the bookstore and picking out books. But what that has slowly turned into is this like constant need to go get these massive book hauls and spend $100 on books and always be buying the new releases in hardback on release day and buying special editions and 6 copies of the same book. And it's too much. It's too much. And we're seeing this creep into a space that I feel like historically has been more about knowledge and the human crisis is not the word, like the human identity, maybe, is a better way to put it. Like, we write because we are human and we want to find that shared connection, and we read because we are human and we want to find that shared connection. And I mean, entertainment, everything else, right? Reading really has this essence of being seen for who you are and your experiences and sharing that with others. And even just as simple as, I read this book and loved it, you read this book and loved it, let's get together and enjoy this, talking about this shared feeling, this shared interest that we have. And when we're always being pressured to buy more, we lose that a little bit. It becomes about the owning and the hoarding and the collection, and way less about the reading and the connection and the empathy and the growth in yourself that you see that comes from reading. I also think, like, we should be using the things that we already own. If you reread books that you already own, you're not spending more money on them. You're enjoying the things that you purchased with your money, and that's the point. Like, we shouldn't be just buying for the sake of buying, which is often pushed on us, including with books. Something else that could go into this is using the library. I mean, obviously, you don't have to own books to love books and read books, but if you do own books, read what you have and reread the things that you have, because then you're getting the use out of them that you intended when you spent that hard-earned money. My second kind of reason for why you should reread books has a lot to do with more of like your brain science. And this is kind of where my teachery side comes out a little bit. So I talk about all the time that our brains love patterns. Our brains are wired in such a way to learn through repetition and patterns. Everything you do in life is a pattern that your brain recognizes. This is why learning can feel difficult but become easy the more you practice, because with that repetition, your brain has created those neural pathways that then allow that thing to become a pattern that you can do more automatically. And with reading, this is still the case. Reading is not a natural process that we are born with. It is a skill you have to learn. And all the intricacies of reading, not just the ability to comprehend, but the ability to connect and plot and see and imagine and all of those things go into what pathways your brain has created through its patterns. Rereading really helps with creating a pathway in your brain for understanding stories. And this is beyond just plot, right? So obviously, the more stories you read, you start noticing that plot structure. And then when an author breaks a plot structure, that's fun too, because now your brain is having to try to figure out why this expected pattern has been disrupted. But also the deeper things, knowing how to relate to characters, how to pick out those hints from authors, figurative language, using even just theme, right? Like whatever the author's trying to get at. Sometimes it's more subtle than others, and you learn how to pick that up from what you're reading the more practice you have. So the first time you read a book, often you're just looking at the plot. You're trying to figure out who the characters are, where you're at, what's happening, what's going to happen, the ending. You want that finish to the book. And so your brain is mostly focusing on the plot pattern. When you reread a book, your brain already knows what pattern the plot is going to take. So it has the capacity to focus on other things as you're reading and notice those patterns as well. And so this really can strengthen your reading abilities. And I know to some extent this feels like, well, I'm not in school, I'm not studying these books, who cares, right? I'm just reading for fun. And that's true. I mean, there's plenty of things I read that I don't feel like I'm putting a lot of brain power into understanding them, because that's not the point. But I feel like there's always stuff out there that we want to read, that we start reading and we feel like, I don't know, I'm lost. Maybe I don't get this. Maybe I'm not connecting with this the way other people are. And often I feel like people are so worried about feeling unintelligent that they will quit instead of pushing through, which is really how you learn and grow anyways. But when you're rereading, your brain's not having to work so hard, and so you're building those strengths, so then when you try to read something that might have previously been a little bit too difficult for you, it doesn't feel as hard because your brain is more familiar and has those skills in order to comprehend that. And I just think that's a good skill for anybody to have, especially in this day and age where critical thinking and media literacy and all this stuff is just not as strong as it used to be in a lot of ways. I think that building that skill of understanding and looking deeper and being able to just connect to stuff that's different than what you normally read or what you would normally encounter is a good, healthy skill to develop as a person. The third reason is more, I don't know, emotional, I guess. I feel like we bring emotions to books. When you are truly invested in something that you're reading, you're more likely to connect pieces of yourself to it emotionally, whether that's anger or sadness or feeling like you are understood for the first time, that recognition. It's really important. And again, like I said, I think it's a huge part of why reading is so important to people and has stayed so important to people, because it connects us to what is most human about us. And when you read a book, the first time. You imbue all of this into that reading in your mind. And so then when you reread the book, some cool things happen, right? So on the one hand, you might reconnect to the feelings that you had the first time you read that book. It might help you connect to the person that you were at that time. It might help you connect to the things you were experiencing at that time. An example of this for me would be Twilight. I read the Twilight series like my very first semester of college, and it was my first time living on my own. And every time I think of those books, like it has nothing to do with Twilight, the plot, but it brings me back to like the mindset of who I was when I was a freshman in college and the way I felt and looked at the world. And it helps me reconnect with that side of myself and examine those things about myself and compare them to who I am now. And like all of that reflection is just healthy for us as people. And I think rereading books that you've connected to in the past is really good for that. We also do this with like scent and sound. So I read way long ago, and I think it was in high school, I read The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I was listening to a specific CD at the time. Skillet, if anybody is familiar with that band. Every time like I've heard throughout my life, I've heard a song from that album, it reminds me of that book. Or when I've reread that book, I always think of the music that I was listening to. And then it reminds me of the vacation I was on when I read that and the things I felt then. And like it's all just so interconnected because of those neural pathways that we create. And so rereading brings a level of introspection for yourself that you maybe forgot you had, or the feelings that you forgot you had from that period of time, which I think is just a healthy thing for us to do, to go back and reconnect with. And this like really is kind of connected to my last point, and that's that we grow as people. And so when you reread a book, you are bringing an older perspective to it. Usually, I mean, sometimes people stop a book and just reread it immediately because you enjoyed it so much you want to go back to that feeling, that joy, right? But even if it's like you read it 3-4 years ago and now you're rereading it, you're going to bring new knowledge to that, right? And this is twofold. So when we're reading books, we connect to what's going on based off of our prior knowledge. And our prior knowledge really is what determines our mood, our connection to the theme, our ability to predict things based off of our own lived experiences. So when you've had some time pass, you obviously have more lived experiences. So you're looking at the things that you connected to originally with the book through a different lens oftentimes. And this makes the reread new and fresh and exciting every single time because you're going to notice different things. You're going to take different things from the book. You're going to experience different things that maybe you didn't notice the first time around because you hadn't experienced that or you hadn't lived that the first time. Or, you know, you'll connect to different characters. You grow as a person and your books grow with you in a sense, which is another special thing about that ability to connect with what you're reading, is that there's always something different for you to glean from it. And I think that is truly something really special. Overall, my point being, you should reread books throughout your life, whether it's that you reread your favorite over and over because it makes you happy, and we can all use a little extra happiness in this life, or maybe you revisit books that you loved in the past and you haven't read in a long time, and maybe even read books you hated in the past. I plan to reread Wuthering Heights because everybody loves Wuthering Heights, but I hated that book the first time I read it. I hated it. And I don't know, I must have been in high school. So obviously I didn't know anything about anything. And I am really curious to see what I would get from it now. Would I still hate it, or would I notice things that maybe I wouldn't, like that I didn't as a high schooler? So if anybody's interested in that, maybe I'll vlog it or something and talk about my feelings. But I feel like it's probably a good time with the Ridiculous movie coming out soon. Rereading books helps you grow as a human, helps you connect in different ways and strengthens your ability to read, and also encourages you to love the things you have for a very long time. And I think all of these are great reasons why you should reread books sometimes. And I'm not saying never read anything new. Obviously, that's crazy. But carve some space out in your life to reread some things that made an impact on you or that you have thought about again, and just see how it goes. Just give it a try. Couldn't hurt. Not gonna hurt you. So I thought that I would talk about just a few of the books that I've probably reread the most throughout my lifetime. The first book is A Separate Peace by John Knowles. This has very similar vibes to the movie Dead Poets Society, where you're at an all-boys school, there's an accident, there's some level of betrayal, you're following a character trying to kind of piece these things together, but he's very much dealing with his emotions about it and his experiences throughout it. I read this in probably middle school or something, and I never really stopped thinking about it. I reread it a couple of years ago and loved it just as much. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of depressing, but I feel like it's vibey. It's just really vibey and very introspective. So one of those ones I pull out every now and then, kind of gives you that like school vibes, but like literature or whatever. The next one is Anne of Green Gables. I've read this whole series several times over. I am such an idealist like Anne, and I know this is like an unoriginal feeling, but I find that, especially the early books, the later books get a little weird, honestly, on a reread, but the early books help me just connect to that feeling of loving nature and loving the human experience and reconnecting with what is good in all of us and how can we find that in others. Often when I'm feeling very burnt out as a teacher, when I reread this book, it helps me kind of recenter on my values and kind of find my purpose again for not quitting, you know, and being completely burnt out by teaching. Rebecca, oh my God, I have read this book, I don't know, so many times. Rebecca is this young girl who meets this older guy on vacation. I know, crazy. And they fell in love and they get married, and he's like super rich and she's super poor. So she's now mistress of this giant mansion, and all the servants kind of hate her because his first wife, Rebecca, died. And the new wife, you know, this young girl, she doesn't really know what she's doing. And so she's trying to kind of piece together how Rebecca died and what she was like. And there's just this exploration of like self-identity and how do you find your place in the world with others, and this naivety, but like it's kind of weird and creepy all at the same time. And I have a good time every single time I read this book. Okay, this is probably my #1 most read book of all time. It's between this one or the next one, Heidi. I'll talk about Mara first. So this one's called Mara, Daughter of the Nile by Eloise Jarvis McGraw. I don't even know how I came across this book. I think a family that I was like friends with, their daughter, they had a bunch of books, and I want to say maybe I saw it on the bookshelf, and so I picked it up because I was obsessed with Egypt, and the cover, you know, it's set in Egypt, and so I was like, oh, this is for me. But it's just so good. It's just so good. It's like a comfort read for me. I read it probably once a year, once every other year. You're following Mara. She's a poor servant girl. She gets hired by this guy to become a servant in the palace so that she can figure out, so she can essentially be a spy. And she's trying to uncover who's tipping off the prince to be able to do these things because they're trying to bring the prince down. And so she's essentially like on the bad guy side. Well, then she meets the prince, and of course, you know, sparks fly, and there's all this other stuff that happens, and now she's kind of having to be a double agent. And I just love it. It's just fun. It's just a fun story. I know what's going to happen, and I still love it every time. I eat it up. I love the romance. It's just a good book. It's like my #1 comfort read. So I've read this way too many times. Way too many times. it makes me want to reread it just holding it, because I just really love this book. And I don't know if that's just a me thing. Like, I don't know if it's just right place, right time, and it's just stuck with me. But yeah, I've reread that a lot. And then also Heidi. I haven't reread this in a few years, actually. But when I was younger, I think I went through a phase. I read this like constantly. Like, it was a problem. I think really what it was is I connected to Heidi's feelings of being lost and othered, and that she couldn't find a connection anywhere, and then she finally did, and I always loved that for her, you know. So I think it just spoke to something that I felt in my childhood that I couldn't name, and it was very soothing for that inner child or whatever at the time. And so I have just really fond memories of this book, and this is like the copy I've had since I was in elementary school. Like, I love this book and have reread it a lot. I probably should do a reread soon. It's just a good story. All right. Next is the Selection series. This is one of those ones that's just like fun popcorn reads. Like, the whole series is what I've reread a whole lot of. It's definitely like a princess version of The Bachelor, but set in a dystopian Hunger Games type world. And it's silly and it's fluffy, and I eat it up every time. This is like my go-to book if I'm in a reading slump and I just like can't get into anything I'm reading. I read this series. If I have kids that, and usually girls, it's not that the boys don't read it, but like it's easier to get the girls to try it. But like if they struggle to find something that they like, or again are in a reading slump, I'm like, read this book. I can't talk about favorite books that I've reread without talking about Heartstopper. This is, again, I've reread this 3 or 4 times, and it's easier to reread, you know, because it's a graphic novel, but you're following Charlie and Nick, and they go to an all-boys school. Charlie is gay and gets outed to the school without like wanting to be. And the next year, after like he was bullied the previous year, he's just dealt with a lot of stuff. So you're in the next school year after that's happened, and he gets sat next to Nick, who's a rugby player. They don't know each other. They're not really friends. They don't run in different circles, and they strike up a friendship and kind of fall in love. And I feel like that's not a spoiler. Like, that's like the whole premise of the book. But you know, the series is solid. I cry probably every single time, and the TV show on Netflix of this is also really well done. But you know, I really connect to Nick in this book and his journey of like exploring his sexuality and what that means for him. And it's never too late to learn new things about yourself, and I really appreciate this series for that. And I just love it. It's just so good. It's so heartwarming. It's just like a happy little burst of joy every time you read it. So yeah, this is another one that I recommend to everybody all the time, everywhere. So good. Okay, and then the last one is Aragon. Aragon is a YA chosen one who finds a dragon story, and I've reread this. I'm actually currently rereading the series. So I reread this, I don't know, last year, a couple months ago. I don't even remember. And the writing was not as good as I remembered it being from the many times I read it in high school and college. But I still love the story, you know, like I still love the characters in the world and all of those things. So I think like as an adult, I can recognize the very like YA writing style, but the story and the characters have always connected to me, and they still connect to me, and so I can still come back and enjoy it in that way. But yeah, I went through a phase where I read this book like over and over and over in high school, and I just loved it. I don't know, I just love the world. It's really fun. But this is, I think, where a lot of my love of dragon books originated from, was the Aragon series. All this to say, reread your books. It's going to do so many good things for you in your life, your wallet, your brain, your feelings, etc. Let me know in the comments below your most reread book, if that's something that you often do, because I feel like that's always a good marker of a really good book. Or if you haven't reread books a lot in your life, what is a book that you would maybe like to try rereading as a way to explore a different side of reading that maybe you haven't before? I would be interested to hear about those books either way, because I always love new recommendations and I love talking about books that I also love. So yeah, hope to hear from you below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.